Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So maybe they need more a flexibility in the way they see things or the way that they perceive, it comes to my mind that understanding even the fragility of some of the people that you work with, and the fact that they're vulnerable, even if they look very, they're producing the same results, it doesn't mean that they're all fine and everything's fine. And of course, if they're not.
Yeah, I think people aren't fine. They may trash talk on Twitter, but in real life, they're tender. They're really tender, and their hearts break fairly easily. And it may not be the people that I coach, but I do see the trails of people around them. I hear sort of the heartbeat of the organizations they work with, the people in the organizations that they work with. Not so much my clients, but the people they lead, the people that lead them. I hear sort of that fragility. I think fragility is a really great word for where people are in the workplace right now. And I've heard of so many people on stress leaves this year in a way that I'd never heard of people going on stress leaves before this.
Yeah, me too.
It's like all of a sudden everybody's on a stress leave, and if you're not on it, you might want one next month. And
Yeah.
like, how does that impact the bottom line in an organization? And yeah, so it has been really so it was the first 2 years everybody was really stressed, and then this last year stress leave has been sort of the word. And I don't know what it will be next year. I do think I have this feeling that things are returning to normal in terms of consultants kind of going back to work, which in some ways that's good news. Not for me personally, my work is mostly individual, but I think organizations need my people to go in and help them and support them.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to hear that's starting to happen again. I think organizations do need people intervening and talking, and we call it, in systems work, we call it ventilating the system, giving people an outlet to talk. And so I'm happy that seems to be happening.
Yeah. I think that what comes to my mind is that if we're talking about removing the stress, you could say they will be back to have the same performance. So they would be like in their general task, they would do the same as before. But if we're talking about innovation, it reminds me of thinking about creativity and thinking differently. And it seems to me that it needs another kind of energy or a different amount of energy in order to do that, because this really, you need to really be engaged in what you're doing and not just perform when you're doing that.
There's a wholeness, right? Like to the creativity of innovation. I do art, and mostly I don't do art when I have children. So I have a near 30-year-old daughter, and then I have 12-year-old twin. I mean, I have 17-year-old twins, but when my daughter was 12, I started to do art again, and then I had babies.
Yeah.
And so there's these moments, right? And I sort of picture my art is coming back soon, when my boys go to university. But yeah, there is a wholeness required for that creativity of the wellspring. People need that groundedness. So I do feel like, when I talk about, I keep being, I sort of talk about on my podcast, I talk a lot about sort of self-care. The human soul is the renewable resource of leadership. And I've talked a lot about swimming in my pool. I've talked a lot about going camping and being outside, and and just all the ways that people can think about for self-care. I've wondered if I sound like I'm just on vacation all the time.
You wish.
I wish. I'm not, but it does require sort of that. I do think that people think they can take it kind of out of their bones, and I don't think they can. I think at this point they've already done that in the last 3 years. And now leaders really do need to figure out how they're going to do renewal on a regular basis. Whether, for me, I know the equation for what I try, and mostly it works. I do massage, I do chiropractic. In Canada, we have this osteopath thing that's like different than the osteopaths in the US. They sort
Yeah.
of, I don't know. I always say they move around your organs. I don't know what they do really. But and then I swim. I swim in my pool. I swim I swim with the competitive team. I don't swim competitively, but I go and I work out hard, and then I go and camp, and I went to a music festival. All that sounds like just good fun, but it's not like I'm going and boozing, and although that can be good, that can be renewing as well, as long as there's rest. It's
Yeah.
this, and sleep. Sometimes leaders are so stressed by their work, they reach for the martini, and I really want them to sleep and reach for the smoothie, and then and go for a walk and do the renewing behaviors,
Yeah.
so that, because they take their vibrancy for granted, and I don't want them to.